Yeah, good afternoon again. I am Venus. I am the project officer for the MWA, and I am delighted to welcome you all to the 2024 MWA project meeting. We're going to start kicking off by Emma doing the welcome speech for us. Thanks, Emma. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emma. I'm an assistant professor here at EPFL, and I represent Switzerland on the MWA board. And it's my absolute pleasure it's not changing, to welcome you all here to beautiful Lausanne. We call it the Olympic capital, not because we've hosted many games, because we have the IOC here, of course. And as well to welcome you here to EPFL campus, beautiful campus overlooking Lac Le Mans. Just some fun facts about EPFL for those of you who are this first time here. So it was officially founded at the end of the 60s. It's a federal university, which really focuses on science and engineering. It's a pretty big university with 17,000 students and employees covering 130 different nationalities, all working and contributing to 500 different labs and research groups and 350 professors total. According to the World University Rankings, at least in 2023, we were number 16, so we do pretty well in these ranking systems. We put out a lot of publications, 4,000 publications in 2022. We also have a lot of innovation and connection with industry and produced 21 startups in 2022. We have a pretty big budget of slightly more than 1 billion Swiss francs per year, and one-third of that comes from third-party funding. So we're a very big research institution.
Sorry, Emma, just to stop you from there. I don't think the online people can see the slides.
So we need to... Looks like it's on Zoom now. All right. And one of these groups here is the organization that's supporting us here for the current MWA project meeting, CTAS, Scientific IT and Application Support here at EPFL. So CTAS is the group or platform that procures and operates the central HPC resources of EPFL. If you take the metro into Lausanne, you'll go right by the building. It's the beautiful red sort of shoebox-shaped thing covered in solar panels right to the north of campus. And we support more than 100 different labs and 1,000 different users on our local infrastructure. And a lot of the work and development that we do includes code refactoring and development, service data visualization. So this is a very nice data visualization of the tokamak. The tokamak here on EPFL is actually just located a few buildings over that way. But we also contribute to research and development activities to maintain EPFL's reputation as a leading research facility, including, of course, MWA, the Square Kilometre Array, and Eurofusion. Of course, here in Switzerland, we also have a bunch of members of the Swiss MWA consortium here. We're a consortium of many, many different institutes. I don't think we have everyone from an institute here today, but we have the vast majority of people here today, so say hello. And then finally, getting into the boring part, I guess, some logistics. So you all probably have the agenda link, but it's just here for posterity. We have specific Wi-Fi for the meeting posted around the room, as you can see in those pages there. If that doesn't work, of course, we have EduRoam, everyone's favorite network. And then there's also free Wi-Fi EPFL that you can use. If something happens, like there's a fire or someone gets injured, when you're on campus, you can call this number. The issue is that emergency response gets lost when they come to EPFL. So you can call this number or 115 from the EPFL landline. Anywhere else in Switzerland, just generally for international visitors, you can call 112. And then in terms of local contacts, you can contact Stephanie at this number if you need any assistance, if you get lost, let's say. Or I guess if any of us need help with the AV equipment, then this is the number to contact. And so if you aren't calling these numbers, please switch off or silence your cell phones as to not interrupt the wonderful talks that we'll have over the next few days. If you get lost on campus, don't be embarrassed. That happens to me on a weekly basis. But we do have a pretty nice campus map, plan.epfl.ch. We also have, personally, I don't like downloading lots of apps on the phone, but we do have a pretty good app that has a campus map as well. But this website, has all the different buildings. We're located here in the BC building. The barbecue that we're going to do is over here at the Rolex Learning Center, I think just to the south on the lakeside, right, Stephanie? She's not here, but in this area, you can follow the crowd. And then for those of you who maybe want to go into Lausanne or go take the train somewhere, we have the M1 metro station up here. This is also a metro station, and then the data center is this building chair. If you are having trouble finding the bathrooms, they're just around the corner here. And then in case there's any kind of evacuation, you know, we don't have many natural disasters in Switzerland, but just in case, we can exit this building to the south. And then the emergency assembly point is just at the kind of bottom corner of this kite-shaped building shown here on the map. So that's it. We're keeping it short and sweet. Any questions on any of the logistics or general conference stuff?
Nope.
Okay. So I guess it's Stephen next for the welcome, right?
Okay.
Thank you, Venus. Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Stephen Tingay. I'm the director of the Murchison Wide Field Array. And it's such an enormous pleasure for us from Australia and the rest of the MWA consortium to be here for this meeting in Switzerland this week. As I'm sure most of you will know, Switzerland is the most recent country to join the MWA consortium. I was here last year for the Swiss SKA Days, which last year was held in Zurich. And even before that, we've had plenty of discussion about Switzerland joining the MWA. And what is very clear to me is that having Swiss colleagues joining our collaboration really has the potential to add a new dimension to our project. And I'm pretty blown away by the opportunities, scientific and technical, that we've discussed thus far. We're really putting a lot of effort into bringing together the Swiss community into the broader MWA community. And this meeting this week is a great opportunity to get together people to people and have those interactions that hopefully will lead to an enormous amount of new and exciting science being done with the Murchison Wide Field Array. First up, and in advance, but not really in advance because these guys have been doing so much work already, I would really like to thank Venus and Stephanie for all of the organisation that's gone into bringing the meeting together. Venus cracking the whip on me to get the schedule in order and to send out emails and do all the communications. So thank you, Venus and Stephanie, an amazing job doing all of the local organising. Being in Switzerland, I knew that the meeting would be organised to within this much of its life. It has been, and that's always a great thing. My only slide has a purpose. You may recognise the MWA tile beam pattern. In this incarnation, beautifully decorated by some of our Indigenous colleagues from the town of Geraldton, which is the closest town to the MWA. And this is some quite traditional Indigenous art adorning this 3D printed beam pattern. And because I show this because this is not very far away from some very special items that we have that this year will form some of the prizes for best talk and various different things. So when I knew we were coming to Switzerland, I thought, what's something that we could do that is particularly Swiss? And so I thought MWA 3D beam patterns and chocolate. So can you imagine an MWA beam made of chocolate? You don't have to imagine because we've got them. So I haven't seen them yet. I'm really super looking forward to getting my hands on one because I am a big fan of eating chocolate. By advanced slides, Venus. Oh, come on. Oh, okay, cool. All right, good. Before I get into the main body of my director's update, I always like to acknowledge country and the traditional owners of the land on which we've built the MWA and operate the telescope and collect so much data that goes all around the world. And so I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we've built the MWA and discovered the universe, and that is the Wodjiri Yamaji. So the Wodjiri Yamaji have occupied that part of Western Australia that we call the Murchison for many tens of thousands of years, and their community continues today, and all of their traditional practices and their connection to the country and to the sky also persist. So just down below, a couple of the Wodjiri elders on the left-hand side, a bloke called Ted O'Ryan. So Teddo was actually born on the property that now forms the observatory site. So he's intimately connected to the country. It is his country, so it's always a great privilege to be on country with Teddo. And on the right-hand side, Charmaine Green. Charmaine is a powerhouse behind the Indigenous Art Centre in Geraldton. People from which decorated the beam pattern that's shown up top. And over the years, we've done an enormous amount of work with Charmaine. So we owe a lot to our relationship with the traditional owners of the land. A great deal of success here, Dennis. Oh, here we go. These meetings form a really important part of the MWA project activity. This is the 11th year of MWA operations proper. And this is just to remind you that last year we had the 10-year anniversary of the commencement of operations, and we had a really great meeting in Perth, some really great contributions from our Swiss colleagues who came across at that early stage. We like to make sure everyone who is part of the project is represented. This is actually at the site, at the site of the MWA. The red dirt is the giveaway. But we have a signpost for every organisation in the collaboration that points back home to that organisation. And so we have all of the formally signed up at this point Swiss organisations that have joined the collaboration represented, and more to come once formally endorsed by the board. Emma, was it you that went out there? No, it was Carolyn. Yeah, Carolyn and Jean-Paul actually came out and were very excited to take some photographs of the signposts. Also reminds you that we're a long way away from anywhere, which is sort of the point and the fundamental characteristic of what we need to do modern radio astronomy. So these are all of the organisations, and I know that's not an exact mapping to the list that Emma put up, but that's just because we've got to go through the formal endorsement of all of the additional Swiss partners that are coming in Now, I'm aware that not everyone in the room, in particular, some of our Swiss colleagues, will be fully orientated to exactly what the MWA is and where it is. So I'm not going to go through an enormous amount of detail, but just at a very high level, remind you what we're talking about. So this is an image of, I guess, most of Australia, and the left-hand bit for you is most of Western Australia. So that white outline on the map is the Shire of Murchison. It's the only shire in Australia that does not have a gazetted town. It has an area of about 41,000 square kilometres, so it's about the size of the Netherlands. It has a population of order 100 people in a steady state. So population density of about 2 million people per square kilometre. So it's remote. It is a beautiful location. I really like to take people there just to appreciate the distance scales and the environment. It's easy to look at on a map. It's more difficult to drive to, I can tell you that. So if any of our Swiss colleagues ever find themselves in our part of the world, and we'd really love to host you, if possible, at Curtin University, we always like to take people up there and get them to experience firsthand what the site is like. So anyway, we exist there because we need to be well away from human-made radio interference, and so we need a really remote location from which to operate our telescope. Another fundamental characteristic of our telescope is that it produces a lot of data. And for those of you who were here this morning to listen to Dev's tutorial, you would have gotten a sense for how much data that is. I think at last counting, our data archive at the Pawsey Centre is 55 petabytes-ish. So it's quite a large amount of data. That volume of data is incompatible with being processed in the middle of nowhere. So that red line is a dedicated high-speed optical fibre network that carries our data from the site down to Perth, where it's stored at the Pawsey Supercomputing Centre, and where quite a lot of those data gets processed at Pawsey, but the data go other places around the world to also be processed. So a lot of people think about a radio telescope and they're fixated on the antennas, but we have our antennas and many systems in the Murchison, but we have fundamental bits of our system in Perth. So the MWA really is a telescope that spans infrastructure over some 800 kilometres. And you would have seen photos, but these are just to give a sense of the environment. It's a very ancient landscape. It's very flat. It's very highly weathered. There are very, very few geological features, which is also good for building radio telescopes. And the MWA, which is composed of a large number of very simple low-frequency dipole antennas, actually sits really lightly in this environment. The telescope has no moving parts. What you see here are the tiles. The antenna's fixed to a ground plane, which is just a steel mesh, and that literally just sits on the ground. So there are no civil works, there are no, there's no disturbance of the surface other than where we've had to trench to provide power and communications to the hardware in the field. So it's a very, very light touch radio telescope. And just down the bottom is a photo from a bit further away that really shows you that the telescope just really disappears into the environment once you get a fair way away. The antennas are sort of this big, sort of this wide, so you've got to be up close to really appreciate them. Dev showed this figure like this a little bit this morning, but this basically describes the configuration of tiles. So at the moment, we're finishing up the so-called phase 2 of the MWA. During phase 2, we expanded the number of tiles to 256, so doubled the number of tiles, approximately doubled the maximum baseline length. But a restriction on that was that we could only correlate 128 tiles at any given time. So we've operated these 256 tiles in compact and extended configurations, each of 128. And each of those configurations support different types of science. So the extended configuration obviously gives higher angular resolution. Compact configuration generally gives better surface brightness sensitivity. And it's the compact configuration that's utilised for experiments like the epoch of reionisation experiment. So excitingly, we're now embarking on the so-called phase 3 upgrade period. And so a fair bit of my talk today is to just outline where we're up to in that upgrade and describe what's going on there. So for phase 3, we've upgraded the correlator, the effectively HPC system that takes the signals from all the tiles, forms all the correlation products and generates visibilities that then get turned into images. So the new correlator called MWA is capable of correlating all 256 tiles together simultaneously. And the other big part of the upgrade is the provision of a new fleet of receivers to add to the existing receivers. And what this will do is to make sure every tile has a receiver such that we can generate data and correlate data from all 256 tiles at any given time, rather than switching between groups of 128. So that has a number of benefits. Double the number of antennas means quadruple the number of baselines, quadruple the information content of the data we're working with, double the instantaneous sensitivity. And from an operational point of view, it means that we don't need to send people out periodically to reconfigure the instrument between compact and extended configurations, which is quite a lot of work. And so we will not need to do that anymore. And it's slightly understated down the bottom, but having been involved in the project for a very long time, I think it's fair to say that the financial situation of the instrument and the project and the consortium has really never been as healthy as it is at the moment. So we're getting through the upgrade and spending a lot of money on that. And this morning, some of you would have heard about some of the improvements and additions being put onto the back-end data processing. So overall, the project is in pretty good shape. So just delving into, I don't know, you don't need to read this. The point of the slide is to just show that the MWA correlator is a really substantially upgraded correlator in terms of the frequency and time resolution that can be achieved, and also in combination. Obviously, in terms of correlating 256 tiles rather than 128. The bottom plot here, table, shows you the sort of allowed configuration of correlator parameters. And the point is that most of it is green, which it was not previously. In terms of the receiver development, the fleet of new receivers is being provisioned by our Chinese colleagues out of the Shanghai Astronomical Observatory. Now, this is a project that commenced in October 2019 was when I had the first discussions with Chinese colleagues about putting together a project that would deliver a new receiver system. So it's been methodical work over a number of years now, and it's been a pretty amazing co-design and collaboration between the engineering and technical teams at Curtin University and engineering and technical teams at Shanghai Astronomical Observatory. And I think there'll be some talks on the detail of the receivers during the meeting now. But as a technical development, I've been really super impressed at the methodical fashion of conceptualising the project, progressing that through prototyping and very, very careful testing. And so now it's ready to roll out. It's a really impressive system, and it's going to make an enormous increment on the capabilities of the telescope. Just for context, the receivers need to exist and operate in a robust manner in a pretty highly challenging environment, environmentally, but also in terms of other considerations as well. So this is I think what we call the environmental enclosure in which the receivers will be housed. You get a sense it's in a lab, there's a bench next to it. This is a bit of a beast. So these need to be fabricated, deployed out into the field, and the receivers fit into these enclosures in order to operate. But they don't just fit into the enclosure, they fit into an enclosure that fits into the enclosure. So inside the environmental enclosure, we have a very highly specified RFI compliant enclosure, an EMC enclosure. So this is designed such that none of the radio waves that are produced by the electronics and the sampling systems and digitizers escape out into the environment. So there are very, very, very strict controls on what you can generate at the site in terms of radio frequency interference. And so the receivers actually go into this shielded enclosure. That shielded enclosure fits into the environmental enclosure. So yeah, it's not just as simple as building some nice receivers and getting them into operation. There are enormous numbers of steps to go through. So this is the EMC enclosure going through EMC testing, whereby you put it in chamber and you operate the electronics in the modes in which it's supposed to operate, and you measure as closely as you can any radiation that's escaping that enclosure. And so these units have now been through testing. They're ready to go out into the field and put into operation. The first one we think will go out into the field before the end of September. I think that's the idea. Operate that for a little bit and then progressively roll out the other 15, such that I hope not too far into 2025, we'll be at the point where we can actually routinely correlate all 256 tiles together. So that's an enormous body of work from multiple really highly skilled technical teams around the world. And I just want to give a shout out to everyone who's been involved with this development. It's been a pretty long haul, but we've taken the time we need to get it right. And now that it is right, it's pretty much ready to go. So that will be an absolute revolution for the MWA. So this is something I've thrown in just because, well, for a few different reasons. We've generated a lot of data. We've processed an enormous amount of data. The 55 petabyte archive is an enormous goldmine of untapped discoveries, I predict. I'm not sure if you've come across the work of Natasha Hurley-Walker and colleagues who discovered a new class of rotating radio transients, so-called long period transients. Natasha's published on these objects 2 papers in the last 2 years, both in Nature. This is a really high impact discovery. Her team noticed the signal in a data set, went and looked at a few more, and then went and looked all the way back through the 10 years of the MWA archive and found this object had been present for that entire period of time. Moreover, she then went back to things like the VLA archive and discovered that this transient existed in that archive back 30 years. So archives are a really important, I think, fundamental record of what the instrument has done. And the fact that things like this can exist in the archive of data unnoticed tells me that we should be putting a lot more effort into processing our entire 55 petabytes in multiple different ways. So I've been turning my mind to how do we do that? We store and process a lot of data at pausing, and that's been an amazing facility over the years. We now process data, at least in Australia, on 3 other large-scale systems, shown below. And one of those systems, the first one, is from a commercial provider of high-performance computing as a service. But not Amazon, not Google, not Microsoft. This is a company that exists to provide high-performance computing. Their heritage is out of oil and gas exploration and full waveform inversion analysis of very large-scale seismic data sets. But they now offer their computing solutions as a generic HPC service. They have large-scale HPC centres around the world. So we've got a really interesting mix of facilities that we now utilise, at least in Australia, for processing data. And I guess I see the next evolution of the MWA, of course, in things like the phase 3 upgrade and the upgrade of the telescope and producing more and better data. We always have to do that. But what I see the science teams doing now is really starting to grapple with how to get as much of our archive data processed as efficiently as possible. So I'm going to throw that out there this week as a little bit of a theme for the meeting. I would really like to get to the point where we have HPC facilities in all of our member countries, efficiently working in some way to advance the cause of MWA data processing. Different people will have different views about what that looks like. Thomas is going to give us a talk in a minute, and I'm sure he'll have some opinions about how compute and storage should be set up. But it seems to me that, for example, Switzerland in a lot of ways is, as far as I can see, and I'm not a HPC expert, leading the world in a lot of different areas and looking to the future. So at the outset, I said I was able to identify some really interesting opportunities in terms of Switzerland joining the consortium, and I think this is one of them. Just maybe taking a step back and having a think about how can we maximise the amount of science out of the instrument and the archive by properly harnessing HPC, storage and networking. The other bit of my thought process is obviously connected to 10 years down the track when we're supposed to be grappling with all of this for the SKA. So what do we need to do between now and then to sensibly get to the point where we can process volumes of SKA data at scale. And I think with a 55 petabyte archive, with a phase 3 upgrade producing ever more complex data sets, the MWA as an SKA precursor is possibly now more important than ever. And we've got all the conditions we need to get a large number of people up to speed in how to do that. A key part of that, at least in Australia, is the Australian SKA Regional Centre, which is now funded and is well and truly being established with scientists, support scientists and developers and operations people who will chart the path to the SKA. So in Australia, this particular investment for the first 5 years is focused on supporting the precursors. So in Australia, that means ASCAP and the MWA. And then after 5 years, should be the case that this support sort of transitions into the SKA. So other SRCs are being established around the world. I'm pretty sure Switzerland has an interest in the SRC world. And so I think there's an opportunity there to have a think about how to utilise those resources to absolutely maximise the science out of both the instrument and the archive for the MWA. Discuss. We might come back to it on Friday, and I'm really interested to hear people's thoughts on what might be important in going down that path. So it's almost the last slide. Just in summary, what's next? Well, the phase 3 ambition is very, very close to being realised. All 256 tiles supported by 32 receivers, all being correlated, and that will be a quantitative step change in terms of the abilities of the MWA. And I think it comes along at a really good time to chart the path to the SKA. Some of the, I haven't mentioned it, but some of the design features of the existing receivers have been well and truly addressed in the new fleet of receivers. And so phase 3, I think, is going to be significantly better for the EIR experiment than has been the case for the last 10 years. So it's very exciting. I've mentioned the Australian SRC focus for the next 5 years is going to be on the precursors. So that's a pretty amazing resource to have connected with the MWA. And yeah, finally, just to throw it out there again, I'd really like to have a think about what globally distributed data processing and archiving architecture might look like around all of the various MWA partners. So that's all from me. Really happy to take any questions or comments either now or at any point over the next few days. We're holding the meeting here so that we can build our collaboration and meet everyone and have good, productive scientific discussions. So I'm really stoked to be here. I'm glad you're here, and thanks to our local hosts for having us.
Are there any questions?
Greg?
Prince of Cobb University. I should probably know the answer to this a lot better, but maybe for some of the people who are newer to MWA, how does MWA work as we transition to SKA low, and what is the sort of mixed long-term future?
Whenever I give a public talk, afterwards the first question I get is about aliens, and then the next question I get is about black holes, and then it's usually a 6-year-old after that that says, what was there before the Big Bang? Whenever I give this talk, that's generally the first question I get. So we're in really good shape under our current project arrangements and the major financing in Australia. We're in great shape through to the end of the decade. In 2030, in theory, the SKA should be starting to do its thing. So it's possible that circa 2030, there won't be a need for the MWA because the SKA is all working, it's producing data, scientists are doing science. I guess there are other alternative futures. And so I sort of reserve judgment a little bit. I'm going to reserve judgment until around about 2027. And then I'll give you a better answer to that question. Some people argue that there's a great need for instruments like the MWA in the SKA era. And in fact, interestingly, if you want to go to page 354 in the MWA, in the SKA construction proposal, you will see that the MWA is actually assumed to exist in the early stages of SKA so that you can do a cross-match, cross-verification type of activity. So I can only assume that that means that the SKA will pay for us to continue on. Does that answer your question? It does. Okay, good. I'm glad you think so.
Answer as much as you can answer.
Yeah. Well, there's a fair way to go, right? So I'm open to continuing or not continuing.
Are there any other questions?
Good.
No? No question. Thank you, Stephen.